everybody. My name is Len Perna. I'm the chairman and CEO of TurnkeyZRG. We're a talent recruiting firm and a talent solutions firm globally, all over the world, but particularly in sports, entertainment, music, and media. We are heavy in North America, and I am delighted to have with me today the commissioner of the Big 12, Brett Yormark. Brett, welcome.
Thank you, Len. Thrilled to be here.
Brett is someone that we worked with during the process of doing a search for the Big 12 to find the next commissioner. One of the reasons we're doing this series is because of the thesis that talent is the differentiator between organizations. It is the single most crucial ingredient for shifting the balance of power between organizations. And I think there's no better example of that than Brett Yormark coming to the Big 12. So Brett, when I first called you and we first started talking about this, you had an entire career in pro sports. You were in media working for Rock Nation. What was your first thought when I called you about coming to college sports?
Well, knowing that you called, Len, I mean, obviously I felt that, I had to listen because you've been a big part of my journey along the way. And you know that I was always looking for that next chapter, but it had to be the right one. During my days at Barclays, I had a great passion for collegiate athletics. We became destinational for college basketball. And through that experience, it was always something I pondered, whether I could jump into collegiate athletics at a point in my career. So when you called me and you gave me the opportunity to pitch the Big 12 commissioner job, it was certainly something that intrigued me just because of my history, and something that as I learned more about, I truly became passionate about.
You know, Brett, it's a really good, I think, learning point for people who are listening to talk about how you prepared for interviewing for the commissioner role, because a lot of people that we see don't put in the time to prepare. Talk about what you did to come in and prepare and meet with the board to interview for this job.
And that's a great question. Like everything I do in life, I try to immerse myself, and this was no different. It was a new space, a new industry, although I've been in the sports entertainment industry my whole life. And I just felt I had to immerse myself. It became a second job, in fact. And I reached out to some confidants that really are aware of the space, had lived in the space for a while, people that are very close to me. But on my own, I did as much due diligence as I could, just trying to get under the hood to learn as much about the industry as quick as I could so I could be prepared for the interview process. And I think it was ultimately very helpful because although I didn't know a lot about the details of the space, on the surface, I was aware what was going on in collegiate athletics, some of the challenges, and was very much prepared for the interview process because of it.
You know, let's tell the story. We like to do a homework assignment for candidates before they come in. We say, hey, prepare this homework assignment. And in this case, the homework assignment for Big 12 commissioner was come in with one big idea. Tell everybody out there how you came in to address one big idea.
Well, I remember that. And you said, Brett, bring one idea. And I responded by saying, if I have more than one, is that okay? And you said, yeah, Brett, that's fine. And more than one ended up being 10. And it was important for me to allow the board to understand how I think and my creativity and how I want to innovate. Because candidly, I wasn't pursuing this job to be a caretaker. You know, I saw an opportunity to reimagine and reinvent a conference. And I wanted during that interview process to at least give the board an insight into strategically how I think and some of the things that I'd like to pursue if I was fortunate enough, to get the job. So I came in with 10 ideas, as you know, and many of which I'm executing against right now. In fact, one of the ideas was to kind of create something akin to Teambo. Something the NBA has done extremely well, their consultative group to the 30 teams in the NBA. This morning, we announced the first ever business summit for our 10 existing members and the 4 that are coming in July. And that will take place this spring. And we will discuss all the key business verticals. We have industry experts coming in. We're tapping into our business advisory board. So it's not so much just about bringing ideas, but it's also making sure that you execute against those ideas, which we've tried to do in my first 8 months.
So you and I have talked about the fact that that piece of paper that you brought into the interview with 10 ideas, where do you keep that now? And do you refer to it? And then actually, let's talk about some of the ideas you've brought to the Big 12, which is kind of reinventing how college athletics conferences are operating.
So that 2-pager resides in my briefcase. And it's a reminder of some of the promises I made effectively to the board, and making sure that I'm checking the boxes. And thankfully, in our first 8 months, we've been able to execute against many of them. You know, the first was obviously a business summit, which we announced today. We wanted to reinvent our championships. And by that, I mean, we wanted to drive revenue. And we wanted the conference to reside at the intersection of culture and sport. And if you look at what we just recently did in Kansas City, we accomplished all that by celebritizing our event, by driving incremental revenue. Candidly, we displaced the media, which were sitting courtside, and we replaced that with premium seating for our big donors and fans. And I think the championship was very indicative of where this conference is going, as we use music to help tell our story, as we want to reside at the intersection of culture and sport. And most importantly, we want to drive meaningful revenue that we can disperse back to our member institutions. Music is also a big part of where we're going. And on that 10-point list, I talked about a concert tour, which we're going to be announcing here in the next couple of weeks. We talked about an international strategy, and I'm heading to Mexico, in fact, later this month. And our goal is to launch Big 12 Mexico. So many of the ideas that we outlined during that interview process, we are executing against. And I think they're a point of differentiation for us when you think about the kind of things we're doing and the other conferences. Not to say they're better or worse, but they differentiate us, and they hopefully give people a reason to vote yes for the Big 12.
I mean, it seems to me it's not only just trying to drive additional revenue, but you have completely changed the game in terms of how a conference is marketed, because that marketing helps your coaches attract 5-star athletes. So talk about how you've gotten in now with the athletic directors and the coaches so that they understand what you're doing here is not just about dollars.
Well, and that's a great point, Len. You know, and I give you credit for this, my first 2 weeks on the job was about a listening and learning tour, where I went to every campus. I met with obviously the presidents, but the coaches, the ADs, all the major governance groups. And it was in an effort for me to lay out my vision and plan and make sure that I got, buy-in from all the key stakeholders. And the number one thing that we're trying to do here is to get on the consciousness of future student athletes, to give them a reason to vote yes for the Big 12. And in order to do that, we as a conference need to behave differently. We need to tap into culture. We need to think about what's driving the interest of those future student athletes and give them, so to speak, a peek under the hood, and so that they can vote yes for this conference. One of the first things we did was during our football championship game, we did a merchandising collaboration with a streetwear brand called Bathing Ape. The response we got from that, from current student athletes and future student athletes, that the Big 12 was collaborating with a brand like Bathing Ape, drove so much interest socially. And in fact, the number one basketball recruit for Texas Tech's men's team next year went on Twitter to say, I am so thrilled that I'm joining a conference that would partner with a brand like Bathing Ape. And that was a validation for me, for our conference, and for the things we're doing, because the goal ultimately is everything we do needs to resonate with the student athlete, the current student athlete and the future student athlete. So, and if we can be a catalyst for recruitment and, to drive the value of our member institutions, then we're doing the right thing. So That was one example, but our goal is to do more and more of that, and we're seeding change along the way.
You know, one of my favorite stories, Brett, is on the day that you were announced as commissioner, I got calls from athletic directors that said, "Who is Brett Yormark?" And the worlds are so different between pro sports and college sports, and they often don't mix with each other. And so there were people in the world of intercollegiate athletics who had never heard of Brett Yormark, didn't know where you came from. They had to Google you to find out what jobs you had had. And then about a week later, I got calls from those same people that said, now we know who Brett Yormark is, and we see the vision. So talk a little bit about all the different stakeholders that a commissioner has to get followership from. You had to get the AD room to understand the vision, the board, and getting the board to understand the vision of where you're going. Talk about how hard you work on all those different stakeholders.
Critically important. I'd say that there are a lot of similarities between where I came from and where I am now, relative to the business side of things. But the one thing that I'm working extremely hard at is to try to make sure that I'm managing all the stakeholder groups. And because there are many, when you think about the different governance groups that exist on campus, obviously the ADs, the board, and, managing, to those groups is critically important. Being transparent, being accessible, and it's something I've really worked hard at. And before I even started officially in the role, which was on August 1, I had set up Zooms and meetings with all the ADs and the presidents just to make sure that I reinforced, my vision, that I listened to their vision for the conference, because obviously it's a collaborative effort. And I continue to do that. I mean, we do weekly calls with ADs, even though we don't have many formal board meetings. When I feel like I've been out of touch, I'll call one just to give them a general update, because I never want them to read something in the press or hear something that they haven't heard or listened to first. The same goes for all the other key governance groups on campus. So communication is key here. And I think the more you communicate, the more you're building trust, and the more that you can really drive the business forward and put your fingerprints on it. But it's important to communicate to the stakeholder groups.
They talk about, a wartime general and a peacetime general, and sometimes the skill sets are a little different. And I think it was the day after you were announced, or maybe 2 days later after you were selected as Big 12 commissioner, all of a sudden the Big 10 announces that USC and UCLA are going to join the Big 10. And you had not started the job yet. You were not supposed to start the job for another month, but that went out the window quickly. Give everybody a sense of what it was like from that moment in terms of trying to quickly understand the job, the stakeholders, what was at stake, because I believe you had a lot of people in the Big 12 saying, we need to go and see if we can expand our conference right now. So how did you handle all that?
Well, and you're absolutely right. I think we announced that that I was joining the Big 12 in the third week of June. I didn't start till August 1, and a day or two later, realignment occurred, and I was thrown into it, obviously, and have been in it ever since, in fact. But I huddled up with my ADs, I huddled up with my presidents. I said, even though I'm not officially starting, I need to engage now. It was kind of trial and error. Called on key stakeholders in the industry that I was familiar with to lean on them to help walk me through realignment and what it means, and the role I should be playing, as the incoming commissioner. And I tapped into Bob Bowlesby, the standing commissioner. It was critically important for me and him to align very quickly. He had just gone through it in the Big 12, had just invited 4 new schools in. So he was a wonderful resource for me. So, I started picking up the phone and called as many people that would listen, and received incredible guidance, so that when ultimately I was introduced to the media in mid-July, and then ultimately started officially on August 1, I was prepared for the moment. But it was intimidating for sure, jumping in that quickly, and not knowing really the dynamics and nuances of realignment. But again, thankfully, I had some resources in the industry. But more importantly, people took my calls, and I was asking for help, and there were people there to guide me.
One of the other things that has happened, right from the get go, pretty much is these media deals. The Big Ten was going out into the marketplace with its media deal. The Pac-12 has been out there in the marketplace trying to get its media deal done. And really, the Big 12 had a couple years left, I think, on their media deal. And you needed to figure out what the right timing was of that. So give us your thinking on why you push forward quickly to get a media deal done, even though your deal was not up yet.
Well, as I started learning more about realignment and ultimately got in front of the media in mid-July, I realized that my goal as the commissioner, first and foremost, was to stabilize this conference, and to rebuild in many respects, what had been built based on the departures or the pending departures of Oklahoma and Texas. And I realized that the most dramatic thing I could do was to try to renew my media deals early, and hopefully not compromise price, but give us a foundation that we could build on and some certainty. So the first thing I did is I'm a big believer in outsourcing thinking, and I hired Endeavor to work with me and model, what a new TV deal could look like. And I realized, after a couple of weeks on the job in August, that we needed to accelerate those conversations, so we could solidify and stabilize the conference. And I'm a firm believer, and it's kind of been my track record, since I've been in the business, that a good bird in the hand is something that I'm usually going to sign up for. Timing kills all deals. And, I just felt that, it was paramount that we get something done quickly. And thankfully, given some of the relationships that I have and the relationships that Endeavor had, we were able to solidify a deal within 60 days, stabilize the conference. And, it was important for me, given where we want to take this conference, that the conference could reside on the two biggest sports platforms in America, ESPN and Fox, and that we would work with partners that could help glamorize and amplify everything we do here. And I'm just thrilled we did it. When you look back on it now, that deal looks better every day, just given the stress that are on some of these media companies right now, the economic times that we're enduring. So I'm happy we did it. In life, you have to have vision, but you also have to be a little lucky. I think we were a little lucky as well. But I'm just thankful that we're able to come to an agreement with ESPN and Fox, and now we can build other parts of our business because that's in place.
I think a lot of people don't realize that there's only so much shelf space in the TV world. There's only so many TV slots on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Friday or a Thursday. And once those slots are gone, then there's no more shelf space. And so you kind of had to beat other people to a spot in order to secure that shelf space. You did a great job on that. And you mentioned signing up with Endeavor. Big shout out to them. We love them. They're a great client of ours. We love Mark Shapiro and all those folks. They are fantastic at what they do. And because this is all about talent wars, right? So how do you make the determination in terms of what you want in-house, because you did hire a bunch of positions in-house that were added, versus what you want to have as an outsourced solution from a client like Endeavor? How do you decide that?
Well, a lot of that, and another great question. If I have my druthers and a board is willing to afford me the resources, my preference is to always take things in-house. I want to control as much as I can, control our destiny. But there are those moments in time where I do believe, I need subject matter expert guidance and support, and I'm willing to outsource that. When it comes to a media, there were certainly, we didn't have that expertise, nor was I going to bring that in-house. So outsourcing it was critically important. But on most other functions, we're going to bring it in-house. In fact, one of the first things I did is I took the conference to an organizational redesign, because I'm a big believer in talent, as you've said, and that we needed to think about human capital a little differently. And most importantly, be prepared for success. It's one thing I learned from Adam Silver in all my days in the NBA. Even when we were struggling early on, when I was the CEO of the Nets, he always used to say to me, Brett, be prepared for success, investment spend. So the board afforded me that opportunity, and we've added upwards of 17 bodies since August 1. We've added depth in certain areas of the company for succession planning, but at the same time, we've added new business verticals and brought those in-house. And I think it's afforded us the opportunity to move quickly since it is in-house. And, I'm thrilled with the talent that we've been able to attract. We've got great people that are signing up for the vision of the conference right now. And you'll hear some announcements in the over the course of the next 30 or 45 days of different functions that we are going to bring in-house based on my belief that you want to control it as much as you can. One thing I want to go back to on the media deal, Len, and I think it's important to anyone that's listening. I've had a couple of mentors in my life. All of them have said to me, Brett, when you take a new job, you want to get a quick win or two. You want to credentialize yourself. Because for someone like myself coming from a new space, and there were many naysayers, like you said earlier, didn't know who I was, didn't know if there was the right fit. You want to find areas where you can have impact right away and chalk up some wins. Now, I didn't expect my win to be the TV deal. It just worked out that way. But it credentialized the vision of the conference early. So it's enabled us to do some of the things we've done since, more quickly, and in a way that I guess in some respects has disrupted the industry. Had we not gotten that TV deal done, I don't know if I would have had the latitude to do some of the things I'm doing, because it did truly credentialize the new vision of the conference and gave us a win coming out of the gate.
It's a really great point. And, I think the point is get something that's bite-sized that can you can put up on the scoreboard fast. One of the things that comes to mind is one of our other placements, Charlie Baker, who is the new president of the NCAA. And it's such a complicated space in college sports. And what he's looking to do is not try to solve all the problems at once. It can't be done. So he's looking for something that can credentialize what he's doing. And I think he's focused on name, image, likeness, and looking for some help maybe in Washington, D.C. for Congress to allow the NCAA to going back to having a national platform for name, image, likeness. Right now, all the states have different rules and laws pertaining to name, image, likeness. Talk to us, what's it like in the college space having to deal with so much uncertainty and ambiguity on many issues, but particularly name, image, likeness?
Well, it's a great point, and I spent a lot of time with Charlie last week, and you're right. He like me and anyone that takes a new job, there's challenges walking in the door, and he's focused on name, image, and likeness, and has spent a lot of time on the Hill over the last couple of weeks, doing a lot of relationship marketing and identifying the appetite of those in Washington to hopefully do something with respect to NIL. And NIL is a complicated space right now. I will tell you that I'm an advocate of NIL rights and student athletes being able to connect with brands and drive revenue. I think that's a great concept, and it's playing out obviously very publicly now. That being said, there needs to be guardrails. There needs to be uniformity. As you mentioned, every state has their own rules. One of the things we're looking for in a potential solution is to make sure that with some federal legislation, it preempts anything that's being done at the state level, so that it's a playing field that everyone can sign up for, and it's an even playing field. Because even though it predates my arrival here, pay-per-play was not the intent, and total transparency of the deals, and making sure that what student athletes are doing for that compensation is commensurate, and appropriate. So there's a lot of things that we're discussing right now, and my fellow commissioners and colleagues and Charlie, we're at it together. We're very seamless, and hopefully before year end we can find a resolution that works for everyone.
Any advice to someone in pro sports or media or music or entertainment or some other facet of our industry, what would you say to them if they were contemplating jumping into college sports? What do you think about it?
Well, I would say that it's a very exciting space. It changes every day. And some people could look at that as a challenge. I look at that as an opportunity. You got to come into this space thinking, that life is half full, not half empty, and take advantage of some of these changes, which candidly I have begun to do with my colleagues here at the Big 12. So it's a very exciting space. I would also say that it's a space where you can make immediate impact. And for those that want to make a difference, and I think we all do, this is a space that is not as mature as places I've been before. So it gives you some latitude to be creative, innovative, disruptive, and to truly make a difference. And I think as those professionals that are contemplating a move into collegiate athletics, as they think about it and maybe even gravitate to it, you want to make sure that your partner, whether it's a president of school or your board that you work for, has the same mission and vision that you have. Because one of the things that I inherited here at the Big 12, truly to my benefit, is the like-mindedness of our board. The fact that they were willing to go in a bit of a non-traditional direction, and that they had an appetite to break boundaries and to be positively disruptive. And that was the right culture and environment for me. Had it been a different dynamic, I'm not sure I would be in the same place I am now or as productive as I'm trying to be. But that worked really well for me. So I think as you enter this space, make sure that whoever you partner with is very like-minded. And if so, I think there's real opportunity to not only make a difference, but to reinvent and reimagine the space.
I mean, that last point is such a great point for folks from an executive recruiting firm to hear, because the job of a great search firm is to make sure that there is that alignment in place between the board or the owner, for example, and the CEO or president or commissioner that's being hired. Because that alignment isn't something that just happens by magic. That alignment is something that has to be put in place by the search firm as they're doing the process. And you are exhibit A of the perfect alignment and the perfect fit between a placement and a job. And we're so proud of the job you're doing. So one last thing I'll say is the whole thesis of this is that talent is the big differentiator in the world of sports and entertainment and music. Do you agree with that, Brett?
100%. I've always been a firm believer that you win with human capital, the right human capital, the right talent. And, I just use myself as an example and the people we've been able to bring into the Big 12. What we're doing here isn't for everyone, but for the right individual, for the right talent, it could be a great place. And I've seen that in a very, very short period of time. I've seen it throughout my career. Talent matters. Thankfully, Len, I'm going to pay homage to you again. You gave me this opportunity. It's the best job of my life. I've been in great places, but I'm enjoying it. Listen, like anything in life, you got to work hard at it. But you aligned me with the right board. It was the right opportunity at the right time, and I'm making the most of it. So thank you so much.
Brett, thank you. Thanks for making us look good. Thanks for being here today. Really appreciate you just sharing some of these insights with us and your time with us today. For everybody out there just listening to this, we're really pleased to bring you this series, The Talent Wars. Think about TurnkeyZRG if you have any talent needs. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Brett.
Thank you.